I think we can.
Oh, okay.
You can leave it. We're easy going. Yep.
Ready?
I can't hear you, and there's not too many words.
We'll continue on page 10.
Hine ma tovu manayim sheverachim gam yachad. 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 Hine ma tovu manayim sheverachim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is good to be together this Shabbat evening. So there are a few more seats up front if any of you in the back want to move up.
And
But
there are
if-
more seats over here too.
Yes. And if you're talking, we're going to go with what we do with our teenagers and just move you. Really, a few special welcomes tonight. Welcome back, of course, Cantor Louise Treitman leading us in music. A very special welcome to our scholar in residence, Rabbi Amy Scheinerman, who has traveled from Baltimore to be with us tonight and throughout the weekend. Just want to say welcome to a few new faces for our Shabbat evening. A welcome back to some of you who we know have been at home, getting better, healing. Great to see so many of you. Welcome, of course, to those joining us on our live stream. We're going to continue with our song of welcoming in the Shabbat messengers of peace, Shalom Aleichem, on page 24. And I invite you to take this moment as we welcome each other in. Take this moment to welcome in your Shabbat angels, your Shabbat messengers of peace.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leshalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Ni Leshalom, Malachei השלום, מלאכי עליון ממלך, מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתכם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון ממלך, מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
I should say a little welcome back to me as well, because I've been off for 2 weeks, and just thank you for keeping the Shabbat spirit going here. Some of you have been traveling as well, so again, good to come back together this Shabbat evening. It is an honor to invite forward 3 longtime friends and 3 adult learners, Selena Schreiber, Sally Weiner, and Barbara Friedman to light our Shabbat candles this evening. We're on pages 2 and 3.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת. Shabbat shalom.
Good to have all 3 of you up here.
We're going to continue on pages 20 and 21 with Lecha Dodi, and this special melody comes from Rome, Italian melody for Lecha Dodi. I hope you'll join in as soon as it feels comfortable, and you can do this. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem ultiferet v'litila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, ki mekor haberacha מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Verse 5, התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בהורא קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
And we'll remain standing if you are able for Chatzi Kaddish, page 26.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, יעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה, בגלה, ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קודשה בריחו, לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. Yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da, yai da 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 da. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, HaMevorach Le'olam va'ed, HaMevorach, HaMevorach Le'olam va'ed.
Let's join together in the English for our blessing of creation, page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Aravim. Continue on page 32.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amecha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Ukim u'mishpatim Otan limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu B'shochbeinu uvekumenu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei toratecha uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negev yomam vala v'ahavatecha Al tasir mimenu leolamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Ha'ed.
Please be seated. We'll continue with words from the Torah on page 36.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Amen. Let's read together on page 41 words that will lead us into our song of the sea, our song of hope and redemption. Sing the song of men and women, joined in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come. The song of a land once ravished by war, her quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of a world redeemed, the song of peace.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neder ba'kodesh, nora tehilot, oseh feleh, nora tehilot, oseh feleh, malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zeli yanu Adonai imlom leolam va'ed, leolam va'ed. Ya ra ra ra, ya ra 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 ra, ya ra 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 ra, ya ra 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 ra. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Page 42, Hashkivenu invites us to think about our evening ahead, to think about our day ahead, to renew our lives with each day and stretch our prayers all the way to Jerusalem.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים, לחיים, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, שלום, שלום, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, שלום, שלום. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ועל ירושלים.
Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Continue as we celebrate Shabbat with Vishamru on page 44. Just want to encourage all of us. Began my day this morning with Mark Friedman in our Shalom Corner, preschool students. We sing a song called Shabbat Feeling, and the kids really get into it. So Vishamru is like that Shabbat feeling. We refresh our souls with Shabbat, so we need to really get into that.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. בני ובן בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we enter into our tefillah, our Amidah, page 46. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agit tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'koneh HaKol, V'zoher Chasei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Geola livnei bneihem, Le'man Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah Rav le'Hoshia. Mashif haruach u'morid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim. Somer noflim berofech olim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umido melach, Melech memi Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh, Shimcha kadosh, Ukdoshim b'chol yom yalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. We'll continue silently, either with the words on the pages or offering the prayers of our hearts. Feel free to be seated when you are ready.
I wasn't going to give a page, but I'm just going to sing one verse of the Adon Olam. Do you want me to? I can. No, I don't know the melody. Okay. Some words from Adon Olam on page 321 if you'd like to follow. Beyado afkid ruchi be'et ishan ve'ahira ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai li velo ira Adi dum di dum di da da do 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 In your hands I place my soul when I'm awake and when I rest. Oh, you are with me, Adonai. I shall not fear, not be afraid. Adi dum di dum di da da do. Adi dum di dum di da da do. Adi dum di dum di da da do. Adi dum di dum di da da do.
We turn now to page 253 as we take this moment in our service to lift up those who are in need of lifting, to lift up those who are ill as we offer our prayer for health and healing. We are especially thinking of these members of our temple community: Colin Monroe, Enrico Mascaro, Annette Zerachian, Benjamin Horowitz, Bradley Dichter, Mateo Goldman, Esya Rushavskaya, Eileen Arnone, Jean Sands, Tom Fiorino, Jerry Spingarn, Beth Gottlieb, Joseph Sands, Ethel Shernow, Rhea Rebecca, Ida Kublin, Peter Lawrence, Sarah Bat David Yosefia, Rosalind Slifka, Peggy Monroe, Shayna Mannheimer, Richie Berg, Dorothy Lewis, Linda Wilson, Zusha, son of Anika Ahuva, Squirt, Ray Burton, Haley Rishoy. If there are other names that you are praying for, you may share them with us.
Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you again, Cantor Treitman. As we move into some learning in our service, I don't know if Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion still requires the GRE, but I don't know. Back when I was applying, we had to take the GRE, and none of us could really figure out why, because we don't really use a lot of math as a rabbi. But to my surprise, I ended up scoring highest on the analytics section, which I then kind of made sense that I got to rabbinical school and I found that for the first time in my life, I studied Talmud and I loved it. And as you know, your rabbi here loves Talmud. And so this was a little selfish, inviting Rabbi Scheinerman, who is an expert in Talmud, to teach us this weekend. But truly, we actually just met this evening at Rabbi Zub and Barbara's home for Shabbat dinner. Thank you for hosting, because really Rabbi Zub had studied with Rabbi Scheinerman previously and made the shidduch, or made the connection. So I'm very pleased to introduce, and I'm only going to read her full bio one time. So here we go. Rabbi Amy Scheinerman is the author of the Talmud of Relationships, published by the Jewish Publication Society. She is the hospice rabbi in Howard County, Maryland, and serves on the responsa committee of the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and as editor of the Torah commentary column of the CCR newsletter, of which I read monthly. In addition, she is the past president of both the Baltimore Board of Rabbis and the Howard County Board of Rabbis. She has served conservative, reform, and unaffiliated congregations. Rabbi Scheinerman received her bachelor's degree from Brown University, studied at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and Princeton Theological Seminary, and was ordained at HUC-JIR in New York, where she also received a Doctor of Divinity in 2009. If that were not enough, Rabbi Scheinerman is married to Dr. Edward Scheinerman, Professor of Applied Mathematics and Statistics and Vice Dean for faculty at the Johns Hopkins University. Together, they have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Going to invite more. You need to update your website. 6 grandchildren. Mazel tov. going to invite Rabbi Shetterman to kick off our Scholar in Residence weekend tonight with What is Talmud? And we're going to pass out some handouts. And the way this is going to work is Rabbi Shetterman is going to speak here in our sanctuary. You are going to hold your questions for the oneg. So we'll kind of get some oneg food and have a little Q&A after. And I've already prepped Rabbi Shetterman from our Talmud class that all the questions you've asked me that I couldn't answer to save up for this weekend. So. I think this is going to be better for you. I think it's
You're the first rabbi who's ever said they had that experience. I took the GRE too. I'm obviously far more ancient. And they looked at my scores and said, "You want to be a rabbi? You should be an engineer."
That one's your cup under there. You see the cup? That's yours.
Yep. I took the GRE in Tel Aviv because we were at the Hebrew University that year. And you should have been in the room with all these Israelis going through the, what do you call it, the English section of the GRE with all these words that they don't know. They were just laughing out loud. So was I. Okay. Thank you. I am delighted to be here with you this Shabbat, and I look forward to meeting many of you and having conversations with many of you and learning with all of you. It's a pleasure to be here at Temple Beth David. This is a beautiful, beautiful place. And thank you for all those who have welcomed me so warmly already. Thank you to your rabbi for inviting me. And Mark Beal, where are you, Mark? There you are. Okay, thank you. Mark is the first one who reached out to me as the chair of your Adult Education Committee. It's a pleasure to be here with you and for the opportunity to get to know you over the last few weeks. And also thank you to Rabbi Zub, and good to see you again, Barbara. We met at the Naor, that's the Retired Rabbis Conference. I guess it was 13 months ago, right? I had a wonderful time, and we came home with COVID. So sometimes you get a bonus. Well, you know, traveling out to Phoenix, you're going to go through a lot of airport and a lot of people. It's almost inevitable. Better to get it on the tail end, wouldn't you say? So thank you. It's nice to be here. You folks know that you have not only a wonderful Rabbi Emeritus, but you have a wonderful rabbi who is creative and warm and compassionate and funny, and she's a fine teacher too. So teaching in her space is an honor. Jewish tradition is a vast compendium of sacred scriptures and history and philosophical approaches and ethics and spirituality and law codes and storytelling and disparate approaches to ideas concerning ritual, observance, and sacred obligation. That's a very large catch-all, and many of us find ourselves drawn to one or two aspects above the others. I find myself drawn to texts, the sacred writings and the commentaries of Jews who, throughout the ages, have sought to find meaning in the challenges of life that we all face. For me, Talmud stands out among the many sacred texts in our Jewish library as the core Jewish text. And perhaps you're thinking, what about the Torah? Isn't that the core Jewish text? Isn't that the most essential and sacred of our books? And while Judaism is unimaginable without Torah, Torah isn't the core of Judaism. Torah is more the core of biblical religion. Talmud is the core of Judaism that we practice. So I want to share with you a story. Long ago, in the early days of the internet, I was fortunate enough to be living in, and I still do live in, an outlet of Geeks R Us. Lots of advantages to this. And so I started a website, and I even learned a little HTML. And at the time, I was one of only 3 rabbis in the country who had a website. Given that statistic, you won't be surprised that email started streaming in. In those early days of the internet, I got some pretty bizarre questions. One was from a man who identified himself as a Christian, and his question was, do Jews still sacrifice animals? Picture the barbecue up on the bima. For some Christians, everything they know about Judaism is found in what they have been taught to call the Old Testament, what we call Tanakh. They are unaware that biblical Israelite religion transitioned to Judaism after the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 of the Common Era. Now, had this gentleman lived somewhere out in the middle of the country, I would have understood that completely. But he was from central New Jersey. Right. The bottom line is that we are not biblical Jews. We are rabbinic Jews. The Judaism of the Torah is not the Judaism we practice. We do not sacrifice animals. We do not have an active priesthood. We don't gather in Jerusalem on the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals. We do not follow the laws of the sabbatical and Jubilee years. We don't send tithes to Jerusalem, even before the destruction of the Second Temple in 70, but also with unprecedented fervor and energy in the years after, an oral Torah emerged that addressed the needs of our people who, in the aftermath of Alexander the Great's incursion into the ancient Near East, were living in a far more urbanized society. And there's a big difference living in a city as opposed to out in the country. This early grassroots movement shaped a Judaism that would eventually stand on its own without a temple as a locus for serving God, without sacrifices as the means to serving God, and without priests serving as the people's intermediaries to God. The Judaism we practice today was shaped by the sages of the Talmud, who filtered, interpreted, and enlarged, yes, this Torah, to effectively create a second Torah, oral Torah, and create for us Judaism, a tradition based not on cult sacrifices in a temple in Jerusalem, but on the pillars of Torah study, worship, and Gemilut Chasadim, deeds of loving kindness. Their discussions and arguments and questions and efforts to discern God's will for Israel in a world that was back then just as violent, frightening, and topsy-turvy as we think our world is, were passed along to their disciples, who in turn discussed, debated, and taught them and passed them along to their disciples. I can make it sound like a smooth, ordered process, but the truth is it was very far from that. But what is important for us to recognize is that while we read Torah each week, it is the Talmud that serves as the bedrock of the Judaism we actually practice. These sages called their enterprise oral Torah in order to distinguish it from Israel's written Torah, the 5 books of Moses that are inscribed in the scrolls in the Ark. Calling Talmud oral Torah was an audacious and utterly brilliant claim that Talmud, written and redacted between the 1st and 6th centuries, was actually transmitted orally to Moses on Mount Sinai, same time that was, and conveyed from generation to generation orally for 1,400 years until the Jews finally wrote it down. Actually, the sages were the ones who finally wrote it down. This was the sages' way of claiming divine authority for their project, which was to live in covenant with God in a world without the temple. When I say that we are rabbinic Jews, not biblical Jews, this is because Talmud is where we find the traditions of all sorts of things that are familiar to us that are not in that Torah. For instance, the Passover Seder, the traditions and order of the prayers in the Siddur on your lap, the marriage ceremony under a chuppah with a ketubah, and the breaking of a glass. And beyond these rituals, extensive discussions of Jewish moral and social values and personal and business ethics that inform our way of doing things and help us figure out when something new arises, how is the right way to do this? What ought we be doing? For many centuries, Talmud was handwritten. Well, that's obvious, because all books were. The first printed edition was published in Venice in the 16th century by Daniel Bomberg. And no, Bomberg wasn't Jewish, but he was a smart fellow and recognized in the Italian Jewish community a lucrative market. After all, Jews like to buy books. As one of my daughters says, Jews decorate with books. This led to the well-known Vilna edition, which looks like this. This is Rabbi Citrin's. That's a pretty imposing looking book, isn't it? It originally consisted of 37 volumes, comprising 5,894 folios, but thanks to the printing press, the material could be arranged to include more than the core texts of Mishnah and Gemara, which constitute Talmud. It could include, what else do you see? Commentaries, ringing it on the left and on the right. Later voices discussing, explaining, clarifying what's on the page, and notice that each page is set up differently so that it can accommodate the commentaries that fit with that page. And they are talking, well, you know how Jews talk, right? Let's be honest. They're talking to each other, but they're also talking at each other, and they're also talking over each other, debating with one another through the centuries. Because above all, Talmud is a conversation. What a strange thing to say about a book that was started so long ago and is still studied so fervently today. And that's because the conversation that was started so long ago continues today. It's an ongoing Jewish conversation about how to live as a Jew in accordance with God's will in a world whose terrain is, well, rocky and unsure. The Talmud contains a wide variety of material, ranging from complex legal analysis to folklore to theological reflection and speculation. You will find large sections on civil law, criminal law, business ethics, religious rights and observances, family relationships, ethical conundrums, relations with non-Jews. You can even find recipes. Yeah, really, you can. And medical advice. I do not recommend following any of it. Magical incantations. I haven't tried them. And strategies for avoiding evil spirits and Dybbuk, also in my untried category. And there's even a dash of locker room humor. Don't be surprised, they were human beings. Talmud is intellectually challenging, It's spiritually exciting, and it's altogether an imaginative and fun piece of literature. I particularly like the narrative sections, the parts that read like stories. Some of them are 1 or 2 lines, and some of them are much more extensive than that, which for a very long time were dismissed as Talmudic fluff that could be ignored. But I think they're the farthest thing from fluff, as scholars are coming to recognize. Embedded in the Talmud's narrative stories are very sophisticated ideas, perhaps clothed in deceptively simple exteriors, but religiously potent. It really is marvelously fun stuff. So that's what we're going to do this weekend. As the Jewish scholar, Professor Michael Satlow, he's at Brown University these days, pointed out quite a long time ago, 2 starkly different views of Talmud emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries. The first is characterized by Solomon Maimon, who wrote an autobiography that I don't think anybody reads anymore. But it's a very satirical and negative view of Talmud, that Talmud is concerned with picayune little questions of no import whatsoever and can be dismissed on that score alone. And a different view of Talmud that is best exemplified by the Brisker Rebbe Soloveitchik. And one view says, Talmud just deals with all these separate little picayune things that are irrelevant. And Soloveitchik said, no, there is one underlying magnificent idea behind the Talmud, and the whole idea of studying it is that we should figure out what that metaphysical idea of Talmud is. You're welcome to vote in either category. I don't vote in either of these categories. I think it's all far more complicated than that. And these days, one of the fun things about studying Talmud is all the tools that are available to us that were not available to those who came before us. So for example, if I see something in this version of the Talmud, and it makes me curious, and I wonder, why did they use that word, or why are they talking about that? Nowadays, I can go onto the internet, just sit at my desk and go onto the internet and see early manuscript versions of that very same passage, and go and check and see what the Gratz College version looks like. There are 2 Vatican versions. There are all sorts of manuscript versions. These are the handwritten versions. And lo and behold, this is not the only version of Talmud. So if you're reading Schottenstein, or even if you're reading Koren, they're following this, but some of the things that are done in the Vilna edition are pretty new. They are corrections or improvements that have been made in the last few hundred years. So there are lots of tools that we can bring to the study of Talmud, and among them are all the tools that we all know and have studied. So anybody who has studied comparative literature, or just likes to read a great deal, has lots of skills to bring to Talmud. Anybody who is appreciative of psychology has great skills to bring. Those who have a mathematical bent and should have become engineers, they have a way of looking at the world that is useful and helpful, because many of the questions that are being broached need to deal with reason and need to deal with facts on the ground. So the Talmud is a very, very varied book, and it has so much to share with us if we're willing to open ourselves up to it. And I think the one thing that helps most of us who love it very much open ourselves up more is at least for me, a deep sense of humility. I know I'm never going to know the whole Talmud. I know I'm never going to know it on the deepest level. In fact, I go to things that I have read, that I have written, and if I look back at them 5 years later, 10 years later, I am so embarrassed. Really? I didn't see that? I didn't get that? I didn't know that? But that is also part of the joy of studying Talmud. So would you like to do a little with me? Okay. We have a short passage. Charlie, you want to pass some out to you guys? Enough that everybody can have their own copy. This is a lovely little passage from Tractate Sota. You know what Sota means? The Sota in our Torah is the woman who is suspected of adultery by her husband, but he has neither witnesses nor any evidence, so he can take her to court, but he has nothing to take to court with her. So do you know what he does? Torah opens up an option for him. This has actually got nothing to do with our passage, but it's worth saying because we often don't know how to read that book any more than we know how to read the Talmud. What does he do with her? Or what may he do with her? Oh gosh. What he can do is he can drag her to, it's written in the Torah, so it would be the Mishkan, but later the Mikdash. He drags her in front of the priest, and she undergoes a horrible and humiliating ritual. What happens? The priests write out a curse. If you have done what you are accused of doing, may all these horrible, terrible things happen to you. And he writes it all out, and then he takes some water, and he puts the parchment scroll that has that written in it, and he washes the ink out into the water. He takes some dust from the floor of the Mishkan. He mixes that into the water. Taking notes on this recipe? And then then her head covering is removed, which is meant to humiliate her, and her garment is torn, and she is forced to drink that concoction. Sounds pretty ghastly, doesn't it? If she is guilty, it will be proven from heaven because her belly will distend. I think the essence of this phrase means that her uterus will fall out of her and she'll die. But if she is not guilty, she will be perfectly fine and she will immediately conceive. Okay. Does it sound primitive and barbaric to you? Okay, I'm now going to make the argument to you that it's the opposite. In an ancient world where they do not have a police force, they do not have jails, and they certainly don't have restraining orders against husbands who are violent and wrought up with jealousy. Let's be honest, do restraining orders work? Yeah. Yeah, after Shabbos, go Google restraining orders and women who have been killed by men who they have restraining orders on. They don't work anyway. So he's got an outlet. He takes her in a very public, sacred precinct. She is not treated well. She's humiliated, and he loves every minute of it because, none of you men would do this to a woman, but there are men who would. And then she drinks this concoction. Okay, what was ink made of in the ancient world? Some minerals and some vegetative products. You mix that in water. You put a little sand in. Is this dangerous? Did your mother never tell you you got to eat a peck of dirt in your life? Yeah. So she drinks this thing just from the standpoint of medicine and biology. What's likely to happen to her? Garnished, right? In which case, she is exonerated. And who has exonerated her? According to the rules of this game, who's exonerated her? No. God. Because this is God's judgment on her that's going to happen once she drinks it. So what are the chances? She's going to be exonerated. But she's also exonerated publicly and in front of the priests. So now, who's everybody looking at? Yes. And he better be awfully careful if he ever wants to try abusing her again or accusing her of something again. Well, what if she was having an affair, and what if she is pregnant by that man? Then what? She's conceived, and who is credited with having impregnated her? According to this ritual, her husband, and the child is considered wholly her husband's, and he's responsible for it. And maybe it will help their marriage, maybe it won't, but now he is responsible for this child and hopefully will become attached to it. Pretty clever little institution, isn't it? In a world where there are no police, no real trials, and not much you can do about abusive people.
But what if she doesn't conceive?
Yeah, everybody's forgotten about it by then. Yes, not interesting. Here's your answer. So, Tractate Soda has a lot to say about women. Lots to say about women, and not always about women and adultery, but lots to say about women. And later on this weekend, we're going to read a big, long passage from Soda that's some of the best storytelling I have ever read in the rabbinic world. This passage is doing something quite different, but now you're ready for both of them. We are told that Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, what is the meaning of the verse? And we find this in Deuteronomy. You shall walk after Adonai your God. The rabbis read this verse, and what they see is the word acharei. Do any of you know a little bit of Hebrew and know what acharei means? What? What does it mean?
Acharei is sort of after, behind.
Yes. They know after, but they also hear behind. You shall walk behind Adonai your God? And so they ask, is it then possible for a human being to walk after the Shekhinah, to walk behind the Shekhinah, the divine presence? For has it not been said, alert, alert, rabbinic joke coming up here. For Adonai your God is a devouring fire. Well, you walk behind a devouring fire, what's going to happen? Yeah, expect to get burned. So they play these two verses off, both of which are entirely metaphorical, to create this lovely little joke. But there's also a very serious message behind it. What does it mean? How do we follow God? What do we do in our lives? God is God, and we're only human beings. What does it mean to be godlike? That's a question. God created the whole universe. You going to create a universe? Okay, but you've read the passage. Can we read the passage with you? Okay. And then they tell us, but rather, the meaning is to walk after the midot, the attributes of the Holy Blessed One. So now they explain the metaphor in a way that we can all latch onto. What are God's attributes? What do you ascribe to God? That's how you should be. If you think God is cruel, then you would be cruel. You know that theory that people create God in the human likeness? This is an attempt to truly create humans in God's likeness. So then they give us some examples, 4 to be exact, and no, they don't put bullet points in the Talmud, but I just love bullet points. And they give us 4 examples. And they key in on things God does. That's pretty tricky. Why is that tricky? If you're flipping through pages of a printed Torah looking for stuff God does, what are you likely to find? Yeah, here's the answer. Let's not go there, right? There are some pretty scary, problematic texts, and they skip all of those, and they find for us 4 beautiful texts that they reinterpret and bring to us, so that we will have in our mind very concrete images of God doing something. The first one, just as God clothes the naked, for it is written, and Adonai God made for Adam and for his wife coats of skin and clothed them, so do you also clothe the naked. So where are we in this verse? Do you know where it takes place? We're in Gan Eden. We're in the Garden of Eden. And the people are now going to go out of the garden, out into the world, and it's not climate controlled outside the garden. So they need something to cover themselves up and protect themselves from the weather. Isn't that a beautiful image? God was making garments for Adam and Eve. Picture God sitting at a sewing machine and spending the time and effort to make garments that would fit them properly in order to protect them from the elements. Yes?
But it's not all people, because there are those who are clothed, and then there's always some who aren't, and maybe not from their own.
Did you all hear that? That was a brilliant point. But it's not all people. So there are some people who are clothed and some people who are not. And that is the rabbi's point. Just as God did this, so do you also clothe the naked. God set the model, and now whose job is it to make sure that everybody has the clothing they need? Us. Right. And God modeled that behavior for us. The second one, just as the Holy Blessed One visited the sick, for it is written, and Adonai appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre. This is Genesis chapter 18. So do you also visit the sick. Now this one takes a detour through some midrash, but it's very well-known midrash, so you're quite possibly familiar with it, or maybe you heard it a long time ago and forgot it. Since it's Genesis chapter 18, do you know what's just happened?
The
Yes. He circumcised himself, and he circumcised, that's a rough one, isn't it? And then he circumcised all the males in his household. And then in the very next verses, in the very next chapter, we find him sitting outside in the sunshine outside his tent. And 3 strangers show up. But who are the strangers? But do you know what the Torah actually says? It's more radical than that. We can pull out a Chumash, I suppose, but it says they are God. Which is something that doesn't sink in when we read it, because we've learned since we were little, 3 angels visited, blah, blah, blah. But the Torah says they are God. Benjamin Summer wrote a book called The Bodies of God. Benjamin Summer is at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He is not only a brilliant scholar, but an absolutely delightful human being. And he proves beautifully and conclusively that the ancient world had a way more fluid and flexible notion of God than we do. We think we're so sophisticated. They actually understood how to be flexible in their minds in a way that we are working toward. And God could appear, God could be manifest in different places and in different objects even, including trees and, a mountain somewhere in Sinai. God could be made manifest in multiple places at multiple times, and sometimes multiple places simultaneously. And this is a good example of multiple places simultaneously. In all 3 of those, I guess we'd call them humanoid bodies. Well, they look like people. Later, Midrash told us they were angels, they were messengers of God, but the Talmud knows what the text actually says. So, there is a famous Midrash that perhaps you're familiar with. Why were they visiting Abraham on that particular day? Because he was recovering from circumcision. So what were they doing? What mitzvah is it? Yeah, Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, exactly as you say. So here is an example they have pieced together and sewn together of God doing Bikur Cholim in the case of Abraham. And so what do they say? Just as God did it, so you visit the sick. Third, just as the Holy Blessed One comforted the mourners, for it is written, and this verse comes from Genesis as well, and it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed Isaac, his son. So do you also comfort mourners. Now, is there anything in that verse that says anything about comforting mourners? No, this is rabbis reading into it, that what God is doing when God blesses Abraham following the death of his father, blesses Isaac following the death of his father Abraham, is that God is making a, what would you call it? A Shiva call. That God knows to do that. So the blessing is a blessing of comfort, as well as the blessing of the continuance of the covenant through Isaac, which is really what's going on in the text, which is critically important, because we're now on to the second generation of the Abrahamic covenant, and the question has been, who's going to get it? Who's it going to go through? So now we have an example of God who sits at, I don't know what kind of sewing machine God used. Maybe God sewed by hand? Maybe God used a singer? I'm not really sure. But God made clothing and taught us that it's now our job to clothe people who do not have sufficient clothing. And then God, what does God do next? God visits those who are sick, brings them company, brings them comfort, and when somebody dies, God visits again and brings them consolation. And the fourth example, just as the Holy Blessed One buried the dead, for it is written at the very end of Deuteronomy, and he buried him in the valley, so do you also bury the dead. Now, the Hebrew only uses pronouns, and everything in Hebrew has gender, so it says he buried him. Who buried whom? Yes, God buried Moses. Now, we know the reason this was because God did not want anybody to know where Moses was buried. What would the risk be? Actually, I think there are a couple of risks. One is to deify him and make that a place of worship. I mean, look what goes on in Sfat if you want to know. Yes, do Jews worship places where people are buried? Yes, they do. But I think maybe there might have been a fear that we can't go forward if Moses remains here. But if they do not know where Moses is buried, there's no here to stay. And so they're better able to move forward. But it's a beautiful verse taken from the perspective. Now imagine God standing at that graveside and shoveling the earth over Moses' body to make sure he is properly and lovingly buried in the earth. And so we do the same. Hence the Jewish tradition, and I don't know how it's done here, but in our area, we certainly cover the casket, but a lot of families have a tradition of filling the entire grave. Yeah. And it's different in every part of the country. So what have we done? We have created a God who did you study in New York or Cincinnati? Los Angeles, all 4 years. Oh, goodness. Oh, mazel tov. So I had a philosophy professor in New York who loved to explain that God ain't got nobody. He would sing that about 3 or 4 times a semester. I finally got it. Took a while. And here, what have we done? We have made God as physical as you can possibly make. God's handy with a needle and thread. God visits people when they're sick and sits with them, and God's even described as having a body. God comes and visits people when they're sitting Shiva, and God actually digs the grave and fills the grave to bury Moses. That's very anthropomorphic, isn't it? Remarkably anthropomorphic. But now you have a vision of God that says to you, if God does those things, how can I possibly not do those things? It's not just that God's a great role model. It's God does those things. How can I not participate in those mitzvot? And when you do participate in those mitzvot, what are you doing? You're being godlike. You're doing exactly what God does. Yes. It's always a choice. Judaism always presumes free will. You have to choose to do the mitzvah. That is why there's so much encouragement, because you could easily choose not to. Right. The passage goes on for another paragraph, which I excised, because I wanted to get to the summary of this section. And we come to Rabbi Simlai. Rabbi Simlai expounded. Torah begins with Gemilut Chasadim, an act of kindness, and it ends with Gemilut Chasadim, with an act of kindness. And perhaps you can see where it's going, but he's going to explain it to you. It begins with an act of kindness, for it is written, "And Adonai God made for Adam and for his wife coats of skin and clothed them." And it ends with Gmilut Chasadim, acts of kindness, for it is written, "And God buried Moses in the valley." If something begins with kindness and ends with kindness, or if it begins with cruelty and ends with cruelty, if it begins with love and ends with love, or begins with violence and ends with violence, that is a statement that says what? You know the expression A to Z? Right? So what is Rabbi Simlai saying? What do we hear him saying? If Torah begins with Gemilut Chasadim and it ends with Gemilut Chasadim, yeah, that's what the whole thing in between is about too. It's all about teaching us to do Gmilut Chasadim. We need to be taught that? Yes. The rabbis understood that, yes, we need to be taught it. It doesn't always come naturally.
And there are people who do not have the ability to be taught that.
There may be some, but most of us can be taught. And on top of that, it is a matter of being taught. This was perhaps one of the greatest insights of Aristotle, that people need to be taught these things, and the more they practice doing good things, the better they're going to be. Which is why when I was a little girl, there was a little blue box in the religious school classroom, and every week I came in and put my quarter in because I was being trained. It wasn't just giving me an opportunity to do tzedakah, it was training me. This is your Jewish impulse to do it. So that's a very nice text. It came straight out of the Reform movement, that all of Torah is about Gmilut Chasadim. So there's our first taste of Talmud together for this weekend. Thank you.
Again, Yasher Koach, Rabbi Scheinerman, which means strength to you for teaching us with such strength. And now you can see why I love Talmud. Beautiful, beautiful text bringing Jewish values to life that still inspire us. So I didn't print out all the titles. I apologize. But we will continue tomorrow. We're going to move into our concluding prayers. Again, Rabbi Scheinerman will be available for some questions during our oneg. Tomorrow morning, we will begin at 9:30 a.m. right in here. Rich Lustig and I will be leading the service. Rabbi Zub will be chanting Torah. And then we will enjoy a lengthier study and discussion around the topic of women in Exodus. We're reading the book of Exodus right now, including some Talmudic texts. In the evening, 7:15, we'll come back in the library for Havdalah, dessert, and study about the rabbis' radical views of God. And Sunday morning, 9:30, breakfast hosted by Brotherhood, 10 o'clock, our final session with our rabbi, Jews and Power from Purim to Pesach. Very relevant for today, looking at some contemporary issues as well as Talmud. We'll look forward to seeing you throughout. Thank you again, Mark Beal and many other volunteers for our oneg, for planning this whole weekend. I'll just say, read your weekly shofar. It is a very full month of March. We have an inclusion fair coming up. We have a temple trivia fundraising night. We've got Shabbat B'bayit next week. Please do note that our service is 5:30 to 6, followed by Shabbat dinner. Kara, if the kids are still here, we're almost at Motzi, but it might be bedtime, I know. You should definitely get a cookie, though, on your way out. This is great. We're training the future generation of Talmud scholars already here at Temple Beth David. We are going to turn now to page 282 as we rise, if you're able, once more for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
We remain standing and turn now to page 294 as we take this moment to remember loved ones who are no longer with us. We are remembering longtime Temple member Florence Preisler for Shloshim, who passed away 2 weeks ago. And we are remembering these loved ones whose yahrzeit, whose anniversary of death occur this week. Marion Albion, Mildred Cohen, Bernard H. Ford, Richard Fraser, Jack Kaplan, Bernard Margolis, Hank Mayers, Ruth Neinstein, Sylvia Rausch, Malvin Sellis, Frederick Stein, Eleanor Zub. And just to acknowledge many loved ones of those of you who are here with us this evening. If you are remembering anyone else, you're welcome to share their names with our community. And we join together in Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala v'yizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei amaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing. You can keep your finger there. We'll turn back to page 5 if Cantor Treitman would lead us in the blessing of Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho Be'ahava uvratzon yimchilanu, zikaron lemahase v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikrahe kodesh, zecher litziat mitzrayim, Kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat.
Amen. L'chaim. This is good. We stayed awake for Motzi. All right. Now, we can bring this down here if you want to. No. Okay. Dean, we'll get. Make sure you get a piece. Okay. So let's join Motzi, and again, thank you to our ushers and greeters tonight as well. I do think we're still looking for someone for March 15th, if anyone can volunteer. And that's going to be our Shabbat in the Round musical service. All right, Charlotte, you ready?
We gave thanks for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi
Shabbat shalom.
You give your friend Dean a piece? Great. All right, Shabbat.
I should turn it back on.
Shabbat Shalom. As I said, next generation of Torah and Talmud scholars here. We're going to conclude with one more prayer for peace, and we'll greet one another in our social hall.
Oseh shalom b'romav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la. Oseh shalom b'romav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.